It's a pleasure to be speaking with you, Anand. Those of you who haven't read him already, his new book, The Republic of Caste, is a good start. It has him uh, giving out, elaborating his views on a whole range of major issues pertaining to the Dalit movement in a very, very cogent fashion. And his book called Mahad, which is a monumental historical reconstruction of the Dalit Satyagraha that happened in 1927 in Mahad in Maharashtra, is another book you must all check out if you haven't done so already. One of the distinctive features of Anand Teltumbde's thinking and analysis is he's always thinking relationally. Caste is never looked at independently. Is caste and class, caste and subcaste, caste and religion. In fact, he's one of the few people who insist that caste and class be looked at together all the time, and which has made him offer distinctive views on the question of reservations, for example, on the question of neoliberal reforms, etc. Anand, can you just tell us a little more about how you see the interface of caste and class?
Yeah, that's quite intriguing in sense that class came through the Marxism in India, and before that, nobody had talked about class. Marx said something about Marx and Engels, who actually constructed Marxism, did not define caste. They did not bother to define class as such, but they have given the parameters. Okay, and class is to be located in the position things in relation to system of production. And they said, in Communist Manifesto, for instance, that history of either two societies is a history of class struggle. So how could India be exception to that? Okay, because there are caste is an identity; it's a born identity. Unlike class, it's a concrete identity. While class is an abstraction. Class is actually to be conceived in relation to the production system that existing then, and then Marx differentiated into class in itself and class for itself, etc., etc. Right. So to conceive something like if India's class analysis to be done, how could India be set apart? That it is a caste society and it's not a class society. Basically, that is the folly of the early communists out here. When they set out this thing, they used the European molds to map up reality of India. So I do not see that way. There has to be something like a classes need to be conceived, and a caste becomes an internal kind of thing. Okay, so something like typically I say that a caste struggle would then be an integral part of the class struggle.
So, what does it mean for thinking on reservations, for example? Thinking of class, what does it mean for thinking on reservation?
Reservation is a different thing altogether. Reservation could be only for something like an exceptional rather, as you say, it is embedded in the meaning of the reservation itself. Like it should be meant for something like exceptional people in as an exceptional kind of measure. Okay, so as it in colonial times it was instituted, it was really meant for only untouchable by every imagination would be the exceptional people, and therefore when they instituted reservation, that time it was not grudged. Okay, when India became independent and all these construction of post-colonial state, so to say, and all these Brahminic intrigues were mixed up in construction of that time this reservation were played as a weapon to divide people as gender. And now in the form in which the reservation exists is quite undesirable.
Anand, you have expressed a lot of anxiety about how the contemporary Hindutva politics is trying to take over the Dalit communities and their imaginations and their electoral support, obviously. What is the Dalit community's relationship with Hindutva and Hinduism, since they're both separate?
See, this Hinduism as such there is nothing like Hindu. Hinduism is something like when people started counting things in order to have a colonial control, you have to have a measurement in order to control something. So in 1857, British had taken that scare and started measuring everything. Okay, like anthropologists, the battery of anthropologists were sent to India to measure noses and ears of the people, etc. And so they started in 1872 the census. So in that they defined Hindu something like Muslims, Christians, and all other people were clubbed together as a Hindu, right? So Hindu as an identity we can relate with. It is not to say that entire caste system is a construct, colonial construct, etc. I would not go to that far. But Hinduism as such is a construct. It's a basically this identity is a colonial construct. So Dalit, when Ambedkar came onto the scene, he has given a counterpoint that he did not identify. Initially, he did it. Ambedkar also went on evolving, and thereafter he disliked that, and he wanted to have a sort of political identity for the Dalits, saying that we are not Hindus. Like you might know that 1905, there were Parliamentary reforms, for instance, and the communal kind of composition of India was in a way acknowledged that Muslims were given reserved seats and so were the Hindus. Rest of the people were given Hindus. So if that is something like Ambedkar took a clue and tried to stress that Dalits were not a Hindu. Because Muslim League that time had given something like said to the Congress that Dalits and Adivasis are not to be counted as Hindus because they wanted to maximize their political share. Okay, and therefrom sort of this kind of arguments was developed. And
Anand, I meant in the present. In the present, how do you view the relations between Dalit communities and Hindutva on the one hand and Hinduism on the other hand?
when we talk about Dalit, you know, Dalits also are not a homogeneous community.
They're not. They're not.
Right?
Yes.
So Dalits also emulate the entire kind of caste structure that exists in a non-Dalits, for instance. So there is a small section of people, and that's actually a large section in a way, that majority, the most populous caste among Dalits actually followed Ambedkar. Again, it's a caste kind of identity that Mahas for in Maharashtra, Ambedkar came from that. Mahas easily identified with Ambedkar, and so is the case with any other region or state. Okay, the most populous caste among Dalits actually identified Ambedkar, and Ambedkar they followed Ambedkar's dictum that we are not Hindus, and they would emotionally say that we are Buddhist and all. They might not have really converted to Buddhist, but they would still actually say that we are a distinct from Hindus. Rest of the people still are Hindus. They, if you ask them, they are all Hindus. But what happened to even Ambedkar Dalits? That cultural kind of identity, they could not develop in real terms. So whatever that happens is actually an emulation of the same kind of cultural thing that stayed earlier.
Anand, Ambedkar is more visible now than ever before, and his contributions have been recognized in a far to greater extent than they have been before. There's a mad bid to hijack him in symbolic terms across political parties, and you've written about why the saffronization, to use your word, of Ambedkar is to be criticized. Can you say more about this?
That may be a bit longish answer, but in short, I try to answer it in this way, that importance of Ambedkar is related with the electoral politics. Mm-hmm. One has to recall that when Ambedkar died, rather when Ambedkar resigned from Nehru cabinet, and thereafter he was a totally neglected person. Okay, he died in 1956, and until 10 years, up to a decade, there was no Ambedkar. There was nothing named after him, excepting for a road that came in Bombay and named after him. There was nothing was named after him. Where he was cremated even, there not even a small structure stood in Ambedkar's memory. People were not, excepting for his family, not many people used to throng out there. Okay, this was the scene. Now it comes, and after his son had to take a march from Mahu, where he was born, to Bombay, and collecting a change from people, and with that money, the present structure was built there. Okay, and mid 60s, all these political economic changes that were followed in post-colonial India, they created such kind of situation that electoral politics became competitive, because there was earlier up to a decade the Congress had almost a monopoly over the Dalits and Adivasi and low caste votes, minorities, etc. But then regional parties, the regional kind of rich farmers class was produced by this process, and their aspiration could not be contained by Congress. And what happened was the regional parties or regional blocs came in and they started bargaining with Congress, and with that the electoral politics became very competitive, and because of that the importance of what blocks came in. And Dalit remains his chief bloc, and that Dalit actually revolved around Ambedkar. And Ambedkar's importance is to be seen, the iconization of Ambedkar. There are two kinds of things. The iconization of Ambedkar gives an opportunity to the ruling classes to cast him in their own ways. So that also is additional advantage of iconizing Ambedkar. So it is in that sense Ambedkar was actually appropriated by every party. Okay, BJP appropriates it. Actually, BJP should be quite embarrassed, because whatever Ambedkar said and stood for is actually antithetical to what these Hindutva forces stand for or have been claiming. But they have been projecting themselves as the biggest bhaktas of Ambedkar.
What about the BSP's relationship with Ambedkar?
BSP again is an electoral party, but they are something like an Ambedkarite, they claim, because their Ambedkarism also had n number of varieties now, right from Ambedkar's death. 1957, RPI was formed, Republican Party of India was formed according to Ambedkar's wishes. You know, Ambedkar's wish was that there should be all progressive people should be brought together as an anti-communist, a non-communist and anti-Congress kind of opposition party. But in 1957 they did it. And right from there on, the issue of what Ambedkarism is, the party split. That time somebody said, the educated sort of advocates said that Ambedkarism is following constitution, because once Ambedkar said, exhorted Dalits not to sort of follow any agitational method or even satyagraha method, and follow in only constitutional methods. So these people picked up from them that and started claiming that Constitution, Baba Saheb Ambedkar has given a constitution. Now constitution becomes an Ambedkarism, and we should only follow constitution. And only the advocates can understand what constitution is. And the kind of the other party was a rustic kind of dhoti wearing person. So they condemned him as a dhotriya, what he would understand of constitution, and the party split. Same thing repeated thereafter in Dalit Panthers. Okay, after a decade, Dalit Panthers came in, and then Ambedkarism became that time that Ambedkar gave Buddhism, and Buddhism is only the Ambedkarism. And it repeats ad infinitum. Now there is another tribe that Dalit youth are coming, you know, from universities, and now, and they're so they are also claiming now that identity of Ambedkarism. You know, now Ambedkarism identity, if you minutely look at it, has been basically anti-communist, anti-left. Rest of the things are all tolerable to them. So today you will find that most of the Dalits actually they do not uh, do not mind being in with BJP, you know, Brahminical forces, but they would not touch the left with a barge pole.
Outside of the Constitution, what other elements of Ambedkar's legacy would you say is important for constructive politics today?
In Constitution?
No, yeah, because you said they've reduced him to constitutionalism, and you think there's more to him than that. So, what else would you want us to look at in his legacy for a constructive politics now?
I rather problematize Constitution. That what is that said normally they attribute writing of the Constitution to Ambedkar. That itself I problematize. Whatever Ambedkar wanted to do has not come in the Constitution. For instance, just before Constitution, when he did not expect to get into Constituent Assembly, he had written states in minorities. So that kind of agenda is totally different. Okay, so he said various things at various points in time. But the constitution, he had to make a compromise. Actually, you have to understand what is the composition of Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly was dominated by Congress people. The Constituent Assembly sent such kind of people who were rather elected by a minority. Something like 18-20% people only had a franchise in the 1946 provincial assembly elections. That needs to be understood. The kind of agenda that was put forth actually was the agenda of this kind of thing. It's more than Gandhian kinds of constitution than Ambedkar's constitution, I would say.
Anand, when you look at Dalit youth today in cities and in villages, what would you say? How are they relating to the legacy of Dalit struggle?
Legacy of Dalit struggle, actually, they do face problems on account of their caste identity, etc. And they do want to struggle, but there are some ways the way the entire dictum is developed by the leadership is that meaning the only identity of Dalits actually is emphasized. And the real life problem, as I said, why they do not touch the communists with a barge pole also is because of that we do not have a problem with this thing. Our fight is dignity, and that kind of thing. So we are anti-Brahmanic and things like that. And real life problem they will never relate with.
If you look at Dalit politics today, does anything stand out as distinctive? I mean, as something absolutely unique and peculiar to today's predicament?
Dalit politics, as I said, it's something like drifted in all directions, wherever opportunity, meaning Dalit politics became rather the political rent seeking. So you float something like claim that few people are behind me, like raise the blue flag, etc., and claim your political rent. That kind of thing has been happening right after Ambedkar's death, 1957 onward. This has been basically the underneath kind of current in Dalit politics. So there has not been an independent kind of Dalit voice. Now there are structural reasons also. You can go back to Pune Pact and all that kind of thing. The independent Dalit voice was lost there, and Dalit politics could not come up with something like propagating or raising that kind of voice.
Anand, you are in this whole book. I mean, if there's one consistent enemy that you're deeply worried about, it's the religious right in India today. And there are, besides Dalits, there are other communities who feel similarly vulnerable. But do you see opportunities for cross-community, coalition politics, not outside the electoral arena?
I would rather see it as a solution, that the only solution, because we cannot go by identities. Actually, caste cannot be a viable identity to construct any radical struggle. Okay, that should be understood first. And we have to find some substitute kind of thing and bring people together on something like sans caste lines. So that is the only approach in India that you can counter the present menace of these fascist parties.
Talking of fascist parties, Anand, you were recently subject to a raid, and several others across the country were subject to a police raid with the Maharashtra police. And since then, you've written an article deploring the McCarthyism in the country. So, what is this, new difficulty, and how do you think one can, confront it?
Yeah, I was not sure even that I would come here because my arrest is imminent. On first, there is a case, and probably I would be arrested on first. But what is to be noted is this, that whatever is happened to us or happening to us can happen to anyone. I have written that the kind of things that they are producing as an evidence from computers. I wrote even an article saying that excess can be substituted by Chief Justice of India or anybody for that matter. Okay. So because there is nothing, and they developed the entire episode in such a way that it's a fakest kind of thing that is possible, and they probably have developed it in that way just to make a statement that we can do anything to anyone. Because earlier times also it used to happen. It has not something like happening first time. It used to happen. But something like a Bhima Koregaon, which does not have any relation with anything, and with that kind of background, they have developed entire kind of thing and got the people who are in forefront in the country fighting for the democratic rights of people, taking cudgels for the working classes. So you name everybody, and everybody has a background. So this is the kind of, it's I think deliberate stratagem of the uh, these people that they are working with, and they're doggedly fighting. You go to court and they're doggedly fighting against the bail, they're quashing the petitions or anything. Everywhere there are appeals and appeals and appeals. They have all the resources, and it is my money, I pay tax. It is my money that is being squandered. That's the joke now, that's the paradox. And where do a common people actually resist the state? When state becomes an amoral, it takes this kind of stand and fabricates evidence against the well-meaning people. That needs to be really noted by all people. It's not something like can be talked in third person. It can happen to you or anybody for that matter. So it's such a dangerous game.
Anand, in this very clearly bleak scenario, do you see any grounds for hope, for activism, for preserving the integrity of India's democracy?
People have not understood, as I feel, and people have not understood the intensity of the menace. And it is being taken as a business as usual. They should learn history the way the fascism came in Europe. And from there, we have some strings to sort of catch up with. Immediately now, the immediate goal is to sort of defeat these forces, and the means that are available to us is only election. They have played huge strategies, they have neutralized the opposition. There is nothing like, they have created a scene that for a common people it appears that there is no alternative, that kind of thing. It's a very scary thing. So just to talk in vacuum about hope, etc., I would not see that way. But we'll have to carry on struggle. Hope lies there, and all people, as I said, that has been my kind of mission, that all people should come together and fight this kind of thing for better India.
Thank you, Anand. We have a few minutes for question answers. Yes.
Hi, sir. Thank you for your talk. There are quite a few points on which I agree with you. But one thing that I could not help but take an issue with is you saying that the Dalit leaders, the youth Dalit leaders, find themselves closer to the BJP or the right wing forces. Here I have a list: Chandrasekhar Azad Ravan, Jignesh Mewani, Kanhaiya Kumar, Hardik Patel, Rohit Memula, all aligned with the leftist ideology and with leftist parties. So these are the prominent leaders. I can't think of even one prominent Dalit leader on the right wing side of things. So what do you have to say about that? Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you. I agree with you. Okay. What I spoke about the established Dalit leaders, the young leadership is a hope really among Dalits. Okay. I'm quite associated with that. So I'm quite proud of it. So you're right.
Can nationalism and globalization coexist?
Can nationalism and globalization coexist?
They coexist with the fascists. Because about a fascist, that nationalism, patriotism, all the Deshbhakti, etc., is the way they would hanker upon, and find a other, somebody other has to be there, that these people have been obstruction for our national development. So that way, that was something like Muslims and all. Globalization and nationalism. Uh, Actually, globalization comes through a conduit of nation state. Nowhere globalization has come without that. The nation state had created a globalization in a way. Okay. So, And what is globalization? It's a capitalist project, right? It's an extremist view of capitalism, like social Darwinist kind of dictum that in the free market, only competitive people only should survive. Okay, this has been even this has come in a Dalit sphere also by way of Dalit capitalism, for instance, right? So, just to answer your question, probably nationalism and globalization, they have been coexisting. Not only that, the nationalism has been, if you take a snapshot of the world, probably nationalism is uh, increasing today. Everywhere, this nationalism is on kind of a rise in the paradigm of globalization. That's the empirical reality.
We have time for one last question, and there's a girl at the back.
About the foundation of the republic, one of the principles was equality of opportunity. What do you have to say, what can you tell us about the state of education in this country and the complete collapse of the publicly funded government school system almost everywhere, and the lack of support it's been getting, and how this has been encouraged by succeeding governments, particularly the present one? Do you have anything to tell us? This means such a lot to us, our children. It's not all our children. That's what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. Not to complicate, actually, education is the most important ingredient for any human development, right? So basically, when you constructed post-colonial state, the stress would have been on education, basic healthcare to the people, and their livelihood security. But these three things only were neglected, and entire gamut was constructed. And actually, they continued with the colonial state apparatus. Basically, nothing had changed. The constitution itself was three-fourths of the India Act 1935, and thereafter entire institutional structure, governance structure, everything actually adopted in toto. So nothing changed. Educational system also remained same as a multi-layer kind of thing with an alibi that Macaulay projected that the state does not have enough money and private people have to provide education. The same dictum actually was followed and after independence, and thereafter rather it got aggravated. Now it is more of a something like India. One end would be something like in California, and another end will be in Ethiopia. Ethiopia also, as a matter of fact, is better in education. So this is the kind of education, and nobody minds it. All middle class people think that, oh, we can have, and even Dalit middle class thinks that, oh, English medium education should be provided to our children and all those kinds of things. So that's a basic fight. Now they brought in Right to Education Act, and all kinds of things were embedded in that. That also is not in, but they will actually label it very nicely, but the content would be the same. Content would be more injurious. So actually, we have been fighting against this real right to education to the people. There is All India Forum to Right to Education that I'm a presidium member, and that movement also is going on alongside. They are under in the name of rationalization. They are actually closing down all government schools, bringing and handing over schools to the NGOs. All kinds of things have been happening. So with a very secular kind of way, again the same thing will be taken back, that the certain people did not have a right to education. You can find that only a handful of people can rise and have a meaningful education in India. Rest of the people are already getting excluded. There is nothing happens to them. They would just carry on.
Thank you, Anand. We'll have to close, unfortunately, but I hope you will stay safe and continue the work you've been doing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.